Hi again. I'm going to do a quick video on note taking in the note card system. The note card system is kind of an old-fashioned way in which we note take instead of doing it digitally, and we typically do it on 3x5 cards. Although these aren't 3x5 cards, they're a little bit smaller because I don't have 3x5 cards, so I made smaller ones with a bigger card. You're going to get a set of these today for you to use for your notes. I'm going to go over these notes, and if you need to, you can pause along the way. So the note card system, the purpose of it is so that we can keep track of our sources, we can organize our notes later, we can cite sources correctly, and we can avoid plagiarism. That's probably the most important thing when you're doing a research project, is avoiding plagiarism. The key terms for this are: a source is a place where you get your information. For example, you can go into a database. That's a mechanism that we use to look at sources, but the database itself isn't the source. There might be a magazine article in there from Time Magazine. That would be the source. Or you might find a movie or a TED Talk in there, and that would be the source. To cite is to give credit to the people or the group that gave you the information. So not having citations can be considered a form of cheating or a form of plagiarism. And plagiarism is the taking of someone else's ideas and passing them off as your own without giving credit to that person. So remember, not having citations in a presentation where you're giving information is the same as plagiarism. So the types of note taking that you do on these cards are three types. Number one is summary writing, number two is paraphrasing, and number three is quoting. And I don't need to explain what those three things are because I believe you know by now the difference between a summary, a paraphrase, and a quote. But I do want to talk about when you summarize and when you paraphrase and when you quote. So in this next slide, if you take a look at it, if this was all of the information that I was note taking on, you'll notice that most of the time I'm summarizing. I'm going to summarize things like facts, statistics, and data and logical statements. I'm going to paraphrase things that are lengthy, but I'm going to put them into my own words. And so they usually end up being about the same length. I don't omit details. And then the last thing is quoting. And you'll notice that at the top, I have this little tiny space for quoting. We rarely put quotes in our notes. The only time we really need to quote people is when they are primary sources that give us an interesting quote that lends authenticity. So I'll give you an example. If I was a person who was giving you a statistic, like if I said 9 out of 10 homeless people in Long Beach suffer from PTSD, that's a statistic. You don't need to put quotes on it. It's just data. You can state data and attribute it to the person who gave it to you. But if I'm a homeless person and I'm experiencing homelessness and I say something like, after I was in an accident at work, I could no longer go to work without crying and thinking about the pain that I had been through and what I had seen at work. And then shortly after losing my job, I lost my house and my car, and I was unable to do anything. PTSD has really put a burden on my life and made me a different person than the person I was 10 years ago. So that is all personal. It lends authenticity to my research. I might use one or two quotes like that, and I would go ahead and get the quote, like the quote where I talk about how it put a burden on my life and changed my life from what it was 10 years ago. Okay. So we rarely quote in our note taking. We paraphrase, but most often we are summarizing. So when you're taking your notes, this is what your note card looks like. You're going to write these 4 things on a note card. Sometimes we can't fit all of the things onto these tiny little note cards. So this one right here could go on the back if you need to. But in the upper left-hand corner, we put a topic, a subtopic. So if my topic is PTSD, that's not what I'm going to write up here because all of my cards are about PTSD. But if I want to talk specifically about psychotherapy in PTSD, I would put that as my subtopic at the top. Okay. I might talk about statistics in the homeless community. So I might make a subtopic homelessness. And then all the information that I put on the card has to do with homelessness. Okay. So we have a subtopic here. We have the name of the source and the author. And again, if that doesn't fit on the front, you can always put it on the back as long as we have it somewhere. Then I put my note here, whatever it is, and then I'm going to write whether it's a summary, a paraphrase, or a quotation. I need that information for later so that when I put my research presentation together or research paper, because you could be doing this for a research paper, I know whether or not I need to put quotes on it or whether or not it's just information that I've gathered and reworded. Okay. If you want to do your notes on paper, you can instead of doing it on note cards. You can go ahead and use this format. So in the left-hand column, we have this exact same information. This would be the subtopic in the upper left. This would be the website that I got it from. And in this case, the person wrote the source as a website. I would write it as a title and author. It's a lot more important than the website. Then up here at the top, this is my note. And then I tell whether it's a summary, a paraphrase, or a quotation. So finally, the last thing I want to show you is why we do this is when we go sit down to organize our work, we want to be able to figure out what kind of order we're going to place this information in. So using cards like this allows us to manipulate visually how we're going to present the information. You can see from the pictures here, the kids had different ways in which they could have taken notes. Some used note cards, some used Post-it notes, some used paper. They took all that information and they categorized it, decided what order they were going to present their information. That's what your job is to do at the very end of collecting your notes. And often when you're doing this, you'll realize that you're missing notes and you have to go back and get a little bit more research. Okay, so that is all for my note card presentation. There's a little bit more, but today, Mr. Figueroa is going to allow you to use your time in class to get a few note cards to get started. He's going to allow you to go into the databases and start collecting some of these notes. By the end of December, just before spring break, I'm going to collect some of these from you so that I can make sure that you're on the right track. Today, he's going to set a goal for you on how many he wants you to finish before you leave. And that is all. I will see you next week.